All right, welcome to this special edition of the Comic Watchers Show. My name is Chad, um, and with me today, my guests are Joey Esposito and Sean Von Gorman of comics, and their upcoming book from Magma Comics is going to be The Pedestrian. But I one of the books that I probably first read of theirs that kind of has stuck with me today is Pawn Shop, and I think for me, I somehow got it on Comixology and read it, and it's just been something that one of the ones I'd like to go back to. But how are you guys doing?
Good, man. Thanks so much. I'm so glad to hear that you got Pawn Shop. Hopefully you can still access it, even though Comixology is whatever
Yeah.
now. But thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Great to be here too.
All right. Well, before we get started talking about the Pedestrian, tell me a little bit about yourselves. How about your history with comics as a reader and as creators?
Sean, you should go first.
I am Sean Von Gorman of comics. I'm a comic illustrator, born and raised in New York City, mostly in Brooklyn. I am a longtime comics fan. I've been reading for as long as I can remember, probably in that sweet spot of the DC Triangle era are probably the things I remember the most. Very vivid memories of the death of Superman and the undeath of Superman and the he's kind of dead but not really aspect of it. I definitely vivid memories of weeping as a little boy reading it, with adults being like, "Oh no, they've done that before. They've done that like twice before. He'll be back." But like having that be a really real moment, and then kind of growing up to become a professional comic illustrator. I've worked on stuff like covers for um, Star Trek for IDW. I'm working on a number of other projects for Z2 of like licensed music properties. I've also had other books with Joey, like you mentioned, Pawn Shop, Toe Tag Riot, and Secret Adventures of Houdini was the very first book I put out, where I became known for going to conventions and busting out of straitjackets and chaining myself to things, and very big promo publicity stunts.
Very nice. And
Uh,
yeah, so good.
Similar to Sean, I've always read comics my entire life. uh, Also very similarly affected by the death of Superman era and the Superman Triangle era. But yeah, just grew up loving comics, would trace Dan Jurgens from the pages of Superman books. But it wasn't until college where I realized, oh, I can make my own comics, and spent a lot of time at Kinko's and not photoshopping, photocopying my own mini comics, and eventually started putting comic books together. My first book was called Footprints. It came out in 2011. It was about Bigfoot as a private detective in sort of this noir world. And then Sean and I put out Pawn Shop. And since then, I've worked at different publishers. I've written some Batman stories. I've written some other short DC stuff. And we're happy to be back together with The Pedestrian.
So before we get into talking about the Pedestrian, itself, how did you guys kind of first, get to know each other? When you were, I would assume when you were working on Pawn Shop.
Oh, Sean's muted.
I think Joey had put out a call for artists on what I still call Twitter, and had responded to him, an artist. And I think he was also doing press for IGN at the time. And I remember being a really pushy young man, where it's like, "Hey, by the way, would you mind maybe doing something about my book for IGN?" And Joey was like, "No, I'm a journalist. I don't kind of mix these two worlds together." And I was like, "Are you sure?" And he goes, "Yeah, no. I mean, if you want, we can maybe see if we can do that. If we don't want to do the comic thing right now." And I was like, "Oh, you know what? Let's just do the book."
Mm-hmm.
I have some strong ethical fiber, I must say. I didn't mention that, but starting out, because it's hard to get into comics, and especially if you don't know anyone, like where do you start? And so I started by writing about comics on the internet, um, at smaller outlets, and then eventually taking over IGN Comics, and that puts you in an interesting position because you want to be a creator, but also you're covering books. And so eventually I made the decision that making comics was way more important, and I left IGN and floundered for 10 years, and now we're and now we're here. But
Joey, you
yeah,
are on coke.
But yeah, Sean is correct, and I had this idea for Pawn Shop, and he reached out, and his work was just exactly what I was hoping for, and it really came together nicely. And I wouldn't say our working relationship was smooth to start on Pawn Shop for nothing with each other, really. It was just kind of like our lives outside of comics were kind of a disaster, at least speaking for myself. And I think it made us more difficult creative people.
Whatever do you mean?
Again, speaking for myself, but I think that going through that together, and then a bunch of other projects that didn't pan out between us, has made us really strong collaborators, 10 years on. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm grateful to have met Sean when I did, even though it was a rocky start.
I think the biggest thing we've learned is that we're not wrong. Pretty much everyone else is probably wrong. If we both agree on something and we both think this is a good idea, and if people are saying no, we don't really want to do this, they're probably wrong, and history will decide.
So, tell me about Pedestrian, kind of what it's about, and kind of what inspired it.
The Pedestrian is the story of a street level costumed hero who never breaks the law to fight crime. On the surface, it's a quirky slice of life story through a superhero lens, but beneath the surface, there's an ancient war brewing linked to the secret history of street signs. And I had come up with this idea of a superhero inspired by the blinking white man in a don't walk sign, and thought that'd be really funny if there were sort of like a hero who doesn't have any powers. So what if you have the Flash who can't run, or you have Superman without any of the powers other than the need to do the right thing all the time, almost to a fault? And what would that look like? Because if you have someone in a costume in the real world and they put their hands on you, that person's going to jail. That person has committed a crime. That's called assault. And we thought that would be a really funny thing to do a deconstruction of the genre. And after working with Joey for a number of years, I came to Joey with this concept because I remembered how great Joey is at writing these really rich characters that could help populate this world and kind of figure out a better sense of what this would look like. And so we kind of took the pawn shop model and we expanded it in a very big way. Whereas those who, I'd be surprised if anyone listening has not read Pawn Shop, but Pawn Shop is a story of 4 people living in New York City. It's 4 chapters. Each chapter is one day in New York from each person's perspective. And we thought that was really interesting. We enjoyed playing with timelines and perspective, that we thought, the thing that ties these 4 stories together is this pawn shop. So perhaps we could do lots of little stories about people living in this town, where the thing that kind of bridges these stories is their connection to this character that they, know as the Pedestrian.
Joey.
Yeah, I think that structure that Sean mentioned is something that I really only find myself doing when Sean and I are working together, because I think we agree on things that are interesting that maybe aren't splashy, if that makes sense. Not to say that this book isn't splashy, because there's some wild shit in here, but I think grounding it in these characters in a real world and a real life is an opportunity to sort of, almost going back to the triangle era of Superman that we were mentioning, like imagining that the supporting cast of those books are the main characters instead of Superman. So you're getting perspective from normal, everyday people who are existing in this world with this weird thing, this weird guy walking around trying to help people. And, it's also kind of some therapy for me in terms of dealing with my experience growing up in a smaller town, or I like to call it a doom town, where you're growing up in this environment that it's been sort of ravaged by a corporation who left you high and dry, like left a bunch of jobs on the table. And you're growing up in a place where all the adults around you are telling you that you got to get out and you got to find somewhere else to go, and there's nothing for you there. But what are the effects of growing up in that sort of environment? How does that skew your vision of what a community is? And I think there's a lot of that went into this book.
So, are there any other characters besides the pedestrian? I mean, is he, tell me what you can about, the pedestrian. What inspirations for his character or anything like that?
There is a very rich lore and a lot of world building that we've percolated over the years. This started as a pandemic project where we decided we were going to make just the best comic book we could possibly make. We figured comic shows don't exist anymore. We got some time. Maybe we can kind of jump into this pedestrian thing that we were talking about. We had maybe like 5 pages. We had like one beat where he stops a mugging, and then while chasing the mugger, stops at a stop sign because it says don't walk. So he has to pause. And we didn't have much more than that. So we figured we had some time. We had a little bit of money in our pockets. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biden, for making sure we were supported during the way. I don't care what they say about you. You're still definitely the better option right now. And
Yes.
we took that moment to invest in ourselves, where we went out of pocket to hire a letterer and hire a colorist to make the best book we could. And so a lot of this, we kind of built a religion around stop signs. What are stop signs? Did someone decide what a stop sign looks like? Or perhaps this is some ancient knowledge that is just ingrained in people that we just instinctively know to stop at a stop sign. And we thought that was an interesting idea of like, what is the lore of traffic signs?
And also, what does it mean that we, like, is someone directing our lives for us because of how these signs are structured? Like, are we being put on a specific path by some other entity who wants us to live a certain way? And is that good or is that bad? I don't know. And that's sort of what the book is about in a lot of ways.
And so I would, I would assume this is like a limited series to start off with, and with depending on how things go, possibility of more, or is it just this one story that you kind of want to tell, kind of like Han's shop?
So this first arc is a complete story, I would say, but we definitely have hopes and dreams of a much larger, much longer run. Like Sean said, the world that we've constructed around this is just the first chapter of what we've talked about and discussed. And as you'll see by the end of these 4 issues, we get a complete story, but there's clearly much more to explore. So we're hopeful that sales are good enough that we can continue.
You're on mute.
You're muted again.
And that's where your listeners can come in and help. We are approaching the final order cutoff of issue 1, where Pre-orders at comic shops are the lifeblood of especially a new series. If you have a local comic shop near you and what we're talking about piques your interest, by all means, make it down to your local comic shop before July 8th and say, hey, give me a copy of that Pedestrian. Magma Comix is making all of my covers for issue 1 and 2 returnable. So a comic shop can order with confidence without worrying about getting stuck with a bunch of books. So please make sure you can either pre-order through a comic shop like Third Eye Comics that has a great mail delivery program that can deliver to your door, or if you are chill with a comic shop and you have a community there, let your retailer know that this is something that is awesome and you need to check out.
So, kind of talk about, was Magma Comics, did you pitch to them and they were the ones that kind of liked the idea and wanted to run with it, walk with it with you guys?
We actually pitched it to every single publisher that would take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned that publishers really dug it, but didn't know how to position it in the market. And it took us a lot of years to realize, maybe the publisher we needed did not exist yet. And, at New York Comic Con last year, Bobby at Magma was at IDW at the time when we had sent it to IDW, remembered that pitch. And we were talking, he found me at my table at New York Comic Con and said, hey, we're looking for pitches at Magma if you have anything. And I said, oh, well, we still have the Pedestrian. And he goes, oh, I really like that. Please send that to us. And they were beyond transparent about the process. Usually you send a pitch off to an editor, you either hear from them 6 months later or never again in your life. Like you see them, you run into them on a train and you're like, oh, hey, yeah, I owe you an email, don't I? And Bobby would send regular updates every couple months, like, "Hey, we're still looking at this. We're filling up our first slate, but we do have another book, another slate coming up." And eventually, they picked up the book, and because they could not forget about it, it's something that stuck with them, and they kind of kept coming back to the pitch after seeing hundreds, thousands of different pitches. Like there's something here. So we're very confident that we found the right publisher here.
I'm trying to think. Is Magma Comics has been around for a while? Is that correct, or they're new? I'm drawing a blank at the moment.
It was an imprint of heavy metal for a little bit, and went independent maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. I think launched officially at San Diego last year with a big display that we're going to both be at San Diego this year with advanced copies of the book with a special cover and doing signings and signing babies and doing panels. So bring your baby down to San Diego Comic Con. I will sign your baby.
Pedestrian.
Are you bringing your life-size stand-up?
I will send one down there. We are working on something very special that if we pull it off, I think would be even better than a life-size standee of myself.
I'm sorry, Joe. I think I may have interrupted you when you were starting to talk.
No, I just wanted to echo Sean's sentiment about Magma and that what I love about working with them is that they have this mentality of comics for comics' sake. It's not an IP farm. It's not putting out comics in the hopes of making it something else. Like they just want to make good comics, and that's sort of our ethos as well. Anything else that comes with it is cool, exciting, but all we really care about is making the best book that we can, and we're really proud of this one. It really dumps everything that we wanted to do into one book. It's superheroes, but it's also Lynchian. It's also, Madman. It's also Power Rangers. It's everything that we are interested in and enjoy, we found a way to work it in, including some old pitches that didn't get picked up. The Power Rangers piece that I mentioned was a pitch that was completely separate from this, that we did after Pawn Shop, that no one wanted. And we were like, screw it, we'll throw it in here. So it's sort of this meta narrative within the book, of a kids TV show that some of the characters watch. And it's awesome. You know, it's a lot of fun, and we think people will really dig it.
This project has been primarily fueled by spite and
Sure.
stimulus checks.
It's true. There's nothing. I like to say that any rejection that I get is just rocket fuel. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like, if you let it damage your enthusiasm, you're never going to get anywhere. The only way is to sort of like photosynthesize rejection as motivation and just be like, well, I can show you that we can do what we said we're going to do.
I think that's my ethos. That's my trigger word of like, you think you're better than me? I'll show you.
Now, other than the main character, are there any other characters that, as you've written or developed the series, that have kind of grown on you that you would kind of like to explore more, given the chance?
I mean, as Joey mentioned, there's a property that we have developed that is inspired by 90s American Super Sentai adaptions called Laser Titans, where we kind of explore our love of these franchises, and maybe if no one else would ever give us an opportunity, this would be our opportunity to do giant robot fights and coordinated combat. So there's lots in this book that could potentially absolutely spin off. Not only if we get to do another volume, we have 3 significant arcs that we'd love to get to do, because if we get to do what we'd like to do, and the payoff on this would be the biggest payoff of any comic of our generation.
He's really underselling it, though. Best thing you've ever read. But yeah, like I love all of our regular people characters. That's sort of 90s 2000s indie movies is like one of my favorite things, of just people hanging around doing stuff, like Linklater movies and whatever. And I think there's a lot of that in this book, in terms of some of the younger characters that we meet who just want to get the fuck out of the town they live in. And I think that's something we can all relate to. I mean, we were just talking earlier about leaving our hometowns, and especially when you're 18, 19, and your whole life is in front of you, but you feel like you're stuck in one place. And I think there's a lot of that in this book, and I would love to further explore where those characters go after this volume, and how their lives have been impacted positively or negatively by their experience with the Pedestrian and the sort of ancient war that's brewing underneath the surface. And also, there's 2 younger characters. They're twins, who are the ones who really enjoyed watching Laser Titans. And anytime they're in a scene that I'm writing, it's a lot of fun. I think a lot of the best jokes and the humor and stuff really come from those characters and their scenes. Even though maybe their future in the book is murky or potentially hazardous, they're a lot of fun to write.
They there is no pretense with them, and they sort of embrace what's being presented to them in this world, because it's a very realistic world. This is kind of like a Ghostbusters type of world, where you believe these characters are real, you believe this world is real, except for this one weird thing that's going on. And the kids are like, we are 100% invested in this weird thing that's happening. We get this completely. Let's go.
Like, imagine if you were 10 and all of a sudden a costume hero showed up in your weird little town. You, of course, would be obsessed and wanting to find out anything you could. And that's sort of where we find these characters in the book.
It's like when you meet a clown outside the context of a circus or a birthday party. You're like, I need to know everything about you. Where do you live? What do you eat? Let's do this.
So having worked to, worked together before, has the process for this book been simpler? I mean, from the writing to the art, kind of, talk about your collaborative process.
I would say, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
I mean, there's very little. There's never really been any ego between me and Joey. The line of ideas and concept is very much blurred because it's been very extremely collaborative where we'll get to, we'll talk about the story a lot before going into it. Joey will write a script. Joey, I'll let you take over. I think my wife ordered some medicine that's at the door. One moment.
Ooh, nice. Well, despite Sean just abandoning us, I would say that this is the most collaborative comic experience that I've had. And like he was saying, any sort of documents that exist, scripts or plot breakdowns or outlines or whatever, is kind of all just a representation of conversations that we've had. We talk a lot on the phone or on the internet or whatever about what the story is, what the characters are doing, what's coming up, what this could mean in the future that people may or may not see, what's happened in the past. Like, we've really talked through all of this stuff, and we'll talk about every stage. So we'll have an initial conversation. I'll write sort of an outline. We'll talk about that. I'll write an issue breakdown. We'll talk about that. I'll write the script. We'll talk about that. This is all even before we turn it into the editor, before Sean starts drawing anything. We're just, the best idea always wins. We just want to make the best, most entertaining, most meaningful thing possible. And I think this book is a true celebration of comics in that it's something that we could only accomplish by working together. And I think the project would have been lesser if it was just either one of us by ourselves or with another party. It really means a lot to me. I keep saying this while we're doing interviews, but it just feels like making something cool with my friend, which is all I've ever wanted to do since I was a kid. And so I'm really, really proud of it, and just how ego-free we've been able to be in this.
I agree 100%. And breaking news, not only did her eye drops arrive, but the credit card that she ordered also came. So she's going to be super psyched.
You heard it here first.
She fell in for like an Instagram scam that was clearly a scam. It was like, oh, close for $1? Oh, let me get on this. And then after the order goes, she goes, oh, I did something bad.
Whoops. Hey, it happens to all of us.
So who are the colorist and the letterer on the project, and what made your interactions with them as you go through the process?
So we kind of going up to this, we sort of had, all the visual stuff was my world. All the word stuff was Joey, where we each had, like, I had a colorist, he had a letterer. We have retained the colorist from the first phase of the project, where we were putting together sort of like a webtoon style story by the name of Josh Jensen, who's been tremendous. He probably colors maybe 95% of all of my stuff, where we've been working together for so long. He's, again, no ego, where he's very open to, if we're not quite getting the vibe of something, he's very open to, maybe there are times I'll just send him some pictures of like a mood board of like, this is what we're looking for, and something will just click and boom, okay, I got it now. And very open to collaborating because a lot of times you don't really know what you're looking for until you see it. And sometimes you just want to try things like, can we see this a little brighter? Can we split the difference here a little bit? And it's all about getting that vibe, establishing the tone of what you're trying to go for.
Yeah, and lettering wise, Sean Lee is the designer and letterer for the series. He's sort of Magma's in-house person, but he's done so much stuff throughout the years. He's a great book designer, art director, and if you've read the first issue, almost right away you can see the impact that his work has on the book with the specifically the walk and don't walk sound effects, which just look so cool, and it's just not even something that I really pictured. Like in the script, I think it's just, the sign says walk, walk, as signs do, but the way that he rendered it is so unique and just really makes that whole thing sing, I think, in a way that was unexpected to me, and that I'm very, very happy about.
It brings a lot of gravitas to this very mundane moment of,
Yeah.
you didn't catch the light. Presented in an epic sense. The stakes are so high that we didn't make this light.
Now, being in New York City, Sean, you kind of use that and get inspiration from the different buildings and street crossings and stuff like that from around where you are.
Oh, for sure. But also traveling outside of the city, where I think street signs have more of an impact because they're not as common. In New York, they're everywhere. There's maybe 20 on every block. There's different types of, spells and scrolls on certain parking signs of like when you can park, except if it's Thursday or if it's raining. But if you go out, out to like a smaller town, like where Joey grew up, like where this story takes place, a street sign is not as common because not everyone kind of walks as much. And even just, coming into it, being a city kid, visiting like smaller towns of like, oh, I could just walk to there. Like, what are you talking about? Like, where walking is in itself a superpower where, we're seeing this character as being unpowered, but no, he's just walking everywhere. It's amazing. Have you ever seen anything like this?
And what's really funny too is part of the inspiration for this. Like when Sean first showed me the design, I thought of this guy from my hometown growing up who would just walk everywhere. I don't know his name. I don't know anyone that knows his name, but you would see him literally every day, just kind of like speed walking around, getting his groceries, getting coffee, whatever. He was always walking constantly. And so that definitely sparked something. And in fact, I was just visiting my parents in this town recently. The house that I grew up in, there's no sidewalk. It's a road where people go like 60 miles an hour. I was trying to walk our dog, no sidewalk. Scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And just thinking back to when I was a kid, walking my childhood dog on that road, and I'm just like, this is insane. I can't believe anyone let me skateboard down this road. Like, well, my dog is pulling me on his leash, and it just seems so dangerous. And we really could have done with some street signs around there, I would say.
So,
Joey's been a ghost this whole time.
so what creators inspire you? As a writer, Joey, and as an artist, Sean. Do you find inspiration, from to bring to your work?
I think the biggest is probably Mike Allred. Reading Madman, that first volume for the first time, really kind of made something click in my head where I said, oh, I want to make comics. This is great. And Madman, for anyone who doesn't read Madman, is, it's basically all the things Mike Allred loves rolled up into a comic book. There's so much of Mike in that work, of like his hopes and dreams, things he loves, all wrapped up in this fun, quirky book. And that's kind of the approach we took to Pedestrian, where we're going to, this is a very kitchen sink book where we're putting everything we love into this. And there's very much lots of me and Joey both in here, of both of our sensibilities that have been blended in such a way that, if either of you know us, you kind of know, oh, there's some Sean, there's some Joey in there. And I think that's really fun to hear during this press tour that we've been on, of like people who know our work previously, like, oh yeah, there's the Joey, there's the Sean, and it kind of blends together in such a way that you can read it.
Yeah. And for me, comics wise, Terry Moore is a huge one for me. Chris Ware as well. I think they both do a really great job of exploring interior lives of characters. Strangers in Paradise, for example, is like a pretty, if you look at like the plot or whatever, it's pretty mundane, comparatively speaking to some other comics, but it's so rich and interesting. And also just in terms of his own sort of self-publishing himself for so long, it's really inspiring to me. But even if you look at something like Rachel Rising from Terry Moore, it is a genre book, but it's still really grounded in character and explores the community that those characters exist in. And then also someone like Grant Morrison, who just throws away gigantic, huge ideas in a single panel and doesn't return to them. And that's just really inspiring to me, because I think that as a writer, sometimes we're too precious about our ideas. And I think having the confidence to just, this is a cool idea, I'm going to use it for one page and then move on, because I know I'm going to have another idea at some point down the line. I think that's really inspiring. And I think you can see the influence of all of those in the Pedestrian.
And I know you guys said over and over how you guys have worked together, and you guys are, but have you noticed with this project how you guys have grown from when you first did Pawn Shop? How has your working relationship grown? Are you finding things easier when you're collaborating on things?
I think our toolbox has expanded in a significant way. Joey and I have both kind of been on separate journeys, where Joey was selected to be part of the DC Writers Workshop, so he kind of went through that boot camp. I went a different way of working on other projects, and also taking, when lockdown was going on, I took some online classes at the Cooper School, where I sharpened my tool set. I took a really great inking class with Joe Prado. That's probably had the biggest impact on my work, because if you look at Pawn Shop, it's it's not overly defined on the characters. It's a very emotional book, so a lot of it is me using watercolors to express emotions, whereas my work for a long time was not something that one would consider marketable working in comics, where it's like, oh, that's what you're looking for. And something kind of clicked in a way where it's like, oh, now I know what you're looking for, and my storytelling and communication is a lot more effective than it was, because I know what you're looking for, what you need to see here. And also, while at the same time always trying to push myself and grow and experiment, and let's try this would be weird, let's do this, and where can we save time, what would be really cool, and then kind of balancing these types of things.
Yeah, and I think working with Sean, something that I love is he takes the work really seriously, but all the bullshit around, being in comics and whatever, not so much, because it is about the work. But also, having worked together for a while, being on the same wavelength, I think helps us be more confident in our work and make bolder, not only storytelling choices, but also like career-minded choices. Like Sean mentioned, we went around to a lot of publishers when we were shopping the Pedestrian around, and we got some offers that we were like, no thanks. And I think having gone through the experience of having signed bad deals or worked with shady people sort of helped make us smarter in the long. Like, I think we've learned from some mistakes, and I think that has yielded a lot of positive things in terms of the Pedestrian, and knowing what we had was good, and being able to sort of stand our ground and really believe in the project. And I don't think that would have happened had we not had the relationship that we've had.
Yeah, and also the level of maturity it takes to understand that when a comic publisher passes, they're not, it's not a rejection. It's they're just saying, it's like a dinner table where they're being presented with something and they're either full or don't know how to eat that, and they're just saying, I'm just going to pass. If you bring that along to someone else, maybe I'll be hungry later. Maybe you come back to them with, you know, whatever it is, they can't use it right now. They don't know
Mhm.
how to sell it. They're not saying this isn't good. They're just saying we don't know how to position this or sell this in the market. And that's something that takes a long time to know. It's not you, it's us, in a sense, where we're not saying you're bad. We're saying we don't know how to do this. And with something like Pedestrian, it kind of defies a clear label, because you see a superhero on the cover, like, oh, it's a superhero book. We don't do superhero books, but it's not. It's a book more about humanity and how we perceive superheroes. It's a very, it's a deconstruction of a genre that we have a lot of fun with.
Nice. So as we kind of wrap up, here, uh, you want to give one more pitch for, the series and uh, where people can find you uh, on social media and besides San Diego, any other shows you might have planned.
Oh, for sure. Joe and I will both be at San Diego Comic Con. We are also planning to be at Baltimore Comic Con, and I am 100% going to be at New York Comic Con, where there will be some type of presence for this book. There's something for everyone in this comic. We have, at this point, sent this to hundreds of fellow comic pros, readers, friends, families, enemies, retailers. Everyone digs this book. There is literally something for everyone in this book, that if you were to give this number one a chance, we think you're going to find your new favorite thing. And if you want to find your new favorite thing, then get yourself down to a comic shop and be like, hey, may I have my new favorite thing? Or if you're not near a comic shop, get online, go to Third Eye Comics, go to Midtown Comics, pre-order something, because it is uh, we appreciate so much, because we have big aspirations for this, and anyone listening who wants to help us out, we would tremendously, eternally appreciate it.
I echo
Joey,
everything.
anything to add?
Just that I echo everything Sean said, and also in this climate where art is being devalued left and right by corporations and AI and all that nonsense, I think this is something that is truly a celebration of creating, because it is everything that we love and everything that we care about, and something that came from our own brains and wasn't scraped from other people's hard work. And I think that's something that should be celebrated. And if you support those that sort of moral compass, then I hope that you'll check this out. And also, it's a lot of fun.
Nice. And then it comes out August 7th. And where and are you, Sean? I know you mentioned you were on Twitter. Um, any of the other social medias there, or just
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Kara, Blue Sky. If it's a social media, I'm probably on it.
Joey?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Joey Esposito. It's mostly comics and pictures of my pets, and some random like food porn. So,
Yeah. Well, that's better than most of the stuff that's out there on social media. So
it's true.
you're doing something right there, also. But anyway, I want to say this looks like a really good book. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
And I'm definitely going to try it. I tried before this interview to find my copy of Pawn Shop too, so I could reread it. I just didn't have time to dig that deep. And I think at the time I was reading it, I had all my books on my iPad, which is long been tasked to not receive any updates and doesn't work. And
I know that.
so, but I want to thank you guys for joining us here on the Comic Watchers, and you guys are welcome back anytime that you have anything else that you'd like to get the word out on, and we'll definitely spread the word on the street about the pedestrian. See what I did there.
Thank you so much.
But
Thank you.
again, thank you guys very much, and we'll be in touch.